Hello and welcome back to my channel. I'm back in my bookshelf area, and as you may have seen from my last video, which I'm going to plug up here somewhere, I went through the 21 books that I want to read in 2021, and so I've put them all on my bookshelf here, plus a couple more. I've also had a couple of deliveries of more books, so I'm going to try and read them in 2021 as well. But for today, I'm going to go through one of my most requested videos. A lot of people asked me this, so I thought, here it is, new year, new content, going to tell you how I got into publishing. So a couple of people have been asking me how I got into publishing because it's not your typical route. So I always kind of knew that I wanted to get into publishing, but not so strict, and so I guess I'm not as passionate as some people are. Some people know from the minute they come out of the womb that they want to do that. Whereas me, I always loved creative writing as a child, so I was always writing short stories and stuff. And then I never really considered that publishing was a route that I could actually go into, and I didn't know how to get into it or anything like that. So I guess I just never really considered it before. And then what happened was, where I was working at the time, I was doing part-time bar work, and I was working for a tuition company. So I was doing part-time tutoring children for 11 plus and GCSE level, and then at the same time I was doing marketing and PA work for that role as well. And I'd been doing that for some time, and I was like, you know what, it's not what I want. I want kind of the set hours now. I don't want to be working night shifts, etc. So I basically told myself this is it, I need a change of career. It was just to get a bit of cash at the time, so I'm ready to settle down into a 9-to-5 job. And so I started looking, and then it was actually my mum that had found the vacancy that I'm currently at now. So she'd found something online that was a sales and marketing role at, I think it was IWA, the International Water Association. And I was reading through the description, it was kind of sales and marketing, which is sort of what I was doing before. So I was like, yeah, I know, I really like doing that. And because it was for a publishing house, I was like, yeah, obviously step in the right direction, foot in the door, you know what I mean? So if you're not already aware, I was training alongside LDN, which is a training provider for apprenticeships in and around London. Apprenticeship is something that I never wanted to do. When I was doing my 2-year course at college, I was like, no, I don't want to do an apprenticeship. That to me is low paid labour work where they get you to do all the jobs, get you to do all the rubbish jobs, and you don't really get any experience out of it. So I was always kind of no, I don't want to go down the route of an apprenticeship. I want to either go to university or I want to go straight into work. And then when I was applying for this role, I didn't actually realise until after applying for it that it was an apprenticeship. So I'd actually applied straight onto LDN's site for the role, and then it got to the second stage of the application process where I was like, oh, this is actually an apprenticeship. And so initially I had my concerns, and I was like, oh, I don't know if I want to do this. But I persevered, and so my application got reviewed, and then I had a phone interview. So there were quite a few stages in getting the actual apprenticeship secured. I know there were a lot of people applying for it. So I had a phone interview which went really well, and then I had to do an essay on why I want the role, and why, I think the question was why do you want the role, basically, or something quite vague that you had to write a page on or something. I then went to the Stockwell office and had a one-on-one interview, and it was there that they were basically our sales and marketing role that you applied for, IWA, has already been taken. So I was like, okay, why am I here then? And they were but we have another one available, and it's as a production assistant at Bloomsbury. And I kind of was like, oh, I think Bloomsbury are the ones that publish Harry Potter. And I'd done a bit of research on them before as well, so I kind of knew about it, but I didn't really know the production side of it. And when they were sort of sitting me down and taking me through job specification, the requirements of it and stuff, I was like, this just isn't me. I was like, it didn't seem what I wanted to do until they were sort of going into detail a bit about it more. And I was like, okay, no, this does sound quite good, and working for Bloomsbury would obviously be really good. So I had the one-on-one interview for that, and then what I had to do is do an English and maths assessment, and that was just your basics. I mean, I think I got an A grade at GCSE for both English and maths, so I was fairly confident with that. And then because you were going for a publishing role, you had to do a proofreading test as well, which I think I got 100% or whatever it was on that. So that was all sort of at the Stockwell office, And then it was a case of I got called up to go through a group interview, so they narrowed it down a bit more based on the one-on-one interviews at the Stockwell office, and we were going for a group interview at Bloomsbury. And so I do remember it really, really clearly, and I remember being really, really early and sitting outside the bench of Bloomsbury and just looking at it and being like, oh my god, is this the building? Because I'll insert a photo here of the Bloomsbury office that I work in, but it's not how I imagined like working in London. Initially, I didn't like the idea of working in London because I was like, oh, it's so corporate and you're in these big offices that are loads of windows and open space and stuff, and Bloomsbury couldn't be more opposite. It's like converted houses, and it's like really homely, and there's carpet everywhere, and it's just basically just like a big home. And so I remember like when it got to closer to the time, I went in, had the group interview. Yeah, like my colleagues now, we were reminiscing it over the other day because they'd come into the group interview to talk a bit about like what it is that they do, which is obviously the roles that we were applying for. So I think there was about 5 or 6 of us going for the production assistant role, and then there was like, say, 3 or 4 people going for the art worker role as well. That was also a vacancy at the time for Bloomsbury. So there was all of us kind of doing a group interview, and we had a couple of things to do. So this is what we were talking about the other day. We had a load of books given to us, and then the specs on a piece of paper. So it was like, oh, this is 234 by 156 millimeters. This is printed on offset white paper. You were given the specs, and you were asked to match it up with the books that you were given on the table. And you'd have to go through, and they'd just be watching you do it and see how much you know. They did give you beforehand like the information, like what offset white is or what book wove is or something. But it was kind of seeing how that you'd go about that task. Yeah, so I remember really clearly doing that, and then on the same day we went off to do like one-on-one speed interviews. So after that group interview had finished, we were all taken one at a time to go downstairs into another office room and spend 5 minutes with one manager. They asked a few questions. Then when the 5 minutes was up, you went to another manager. They asked 5 questions, etc. So you only really got on that day 10 minutes of one-on-one time with people to like prove yourself. Other than that, it was a group interview. And so for me personally, I feel like I much prefer doing one-on-one interviews because then I can really like express myself and I can talk about me. Whereas obviously in group interviews, it's that balance of, you know, showing your leadership, but obviously not taking over so much and being the dominant one, obviously letting people talk and kind of like working together, showing your teamwork, etc. And so I really enjoyed that day, but I came home and said to my parents, I only had 10 minutes on one-on-one time for an interview with 2 different people. I was like, oh, there's like 5 other people there that went for the role, like it's just not going to happen. I was like, it's good experience, etc. But I was like, I just didn't feel like I had enough time to prove myself. Little did I know that, say, a week later or something, LDN, the training provider, phoned me up and was like, they really liked having you there, and they'd like to invite you for a trial day. And I was like, what? And the thing that I remember them telling me, if you can hear that, that's the train. Yeah, so what they basically gave me feedback on was because when people went off to do their one-on-one interviews and we were kind of left to just chat amongst ourselves or whatever it was, I addressed the group production director, and I'd addressed her by her first name, and I asked her something along the lines of, since joining Bloomsbury, have you read more or less books? And then we had a conversation one-on-one about that. And to me, that was, you know, just me engaging and obviously me trying to connect with them a bit more, but it was general like conversation. I'm not one of those people that can just sit in silence, like I will chat to the people near me. And so they basically fed that back, and they were like, we like the fact that she called her by her first name, and, you know, she addressed her individually, like rather than just a group. And they liked that, you know, I was asking personal questions. So one piece of advice I would say to anyone who's trying to get into the industry, just ask those questions, like whatever it is, whether it's a personal question like that, like are you reading more now that you're in the industry, or are you reading less? Just genuinely chatting to them so that they can get a more of like a personal feel to you, I suppose. Whereas interviews are obviously normally quite formal. I suppose that was a way for me to just express myself as a normal person. And then I was just one of 2 people that went forward to go for a trial day at Bloomsbury. And I remember that really clearly as well, because I was sitting in the office next to what would then become my office. And I was so shocked at how like system-based it was, and I was sat there like so confused the whole day. I don't think it was like a whole day, I think it was probably like 10 till 4 or something. And and I had like a briefing before from my manager, like what we were expected to do, and we basically then were just told to like get on with it. And obviously when you've not worked in that setting before and you haven't really got an experience of publishing and you hadn't have any training on those systems or anything, I was sitting there like,
I literally don't know what I'm doing.
And so I basically just asked questions all day long, like genuinely every single minute I was asking a new question to the people around me. So my manager, who is normally really busy anyway, she had been sort of getting on with her work in and out of meetings, etc. And so it was down to 3 other production assistants to aid me and the other person on the trial day. So they were the ones that, you know, if we turned around to and was like, can you help with this, or what does this mean? And I literally remember bugging them all the time, and then just had a notebook with me and was just writing down everything I could, everything that I learned, any questions that I wanted to bring up with them later. That's definitely something I'd recommend as well. Like if you are on anything like that, like a trial day or an interview, have pen and paper handy, bring it with you, write down questions that you want to ask, even if it seems like really, really silly, even if it's not really relevant to your doing, or you just want context of it as well. I think I knew what I was doing, but I didn't know like why I was doing it. So yeah, like asking the context behind stuff as well. So it was between the 2 of us, and then I got the phone call later to say, like, I got the phone call like a week later or something to say that obviously I was successful and they wanted to offer me the role. And the feedback that they basically gave was because I was asking questions all day long, whereas I believe the other candidate kind of understood what was required of her and just spent all day doing it and trying to get as much done as possible, where obviously I went the more personal approach and like was speaking to people a lot more. Like I remember speaking to the people beside me as well and just asking them about their role, and yeah, just like I said, like asking so many questions. Like I genuinely probably asked about 50 questions that day, and I don't think there's any harm with that. And I know that when we've had new production assistants start as well, like they've been like, oh, sorry if I'm asking loads of questions, and it's literally not a problem, because even when I first started, I was asking questions all the time, and I still do. Like no one knows the job inside out. If you don't have experience in something, obviously you're going to ask someone who might know better. I literally cried when I got the phone call to say that they wanted to offer me the job. I remember, so it was LDN that had phoned me up and was like, they want to offer you the job. And I literally remember being like,
oh my god, thank you so much, I'm so happy.
And then I literally remember running downstairs and like screaming and being like, Mom, I got the job, and just crying. So I was literally over the moon when I got told that, and I suppose the excitement hasn't stopped since. So I was on an apprenticeship, and what that required is nothing like I expected. I genuinely didn't really consider the learning side of it at all, because everything that I'd heard about apprenticeships or read about apprenticeships, it was like you just do a job and you get paid less for it, and that is it, which is just not the case for LDN. Like they, in a good way, they really do push you, they give you plenty of work to be doing, and they do ensure that you are learning at the same time as working. So I've spoken to the people at LDN, and I'm just going to tell you a bit about what the apprenticeship entails. So the first thing is you have workshops every month. So every month is a different module that you'll study. So the first month, I think it's like introduction to the publishing industry or the publishing process as a whole. And then you have a month on like editorial, then you'll have a month on marketing, you'll have a month on production, for example. So then each month you'll have like pre-reading to do, then you'll attend the actual workshop and like learn from that. It's like a whole day of a lecture basically that you're out of office to do that. Normally it was in Stockwell train. So normally the workshops were in Stockwell, and then obviously when the coronavirus hit, we had to start doing all the lectures from home. So it was still being out of office, but being like on a Zoom call all day basically. So they were really good to actually get like learning material and come away with a notebook full of new knowledge basically. And then there's what you call the off-the-job training, and that's basically you're given around 20% of your working week to work on stuff that's not like your usual job. So this can be like doing additional research, doing your pre-reading material. I spent a lot of time like interviewing people when I was in the office about their roles and what it entails, volunteering for other departments. So I spent so many months working with like marketing and publicity and helping them out. So off-the-job training is kind of like the extra stuff that you'll do that's not specifically related to your role. So that's, I suppose, the most beneficial thing in my eyes, because you get the experience of other departments. Then the least fun side of the apprenticeship, because LDN are a training provider, they basically have to show that we're using maths and English all the time in our work. And so we had to use the well-known and much loved VKSB, which was basically you just have to do maths and English work every month. from someone that did get like an A grade in GCSE in both English and maths, it was tedious and it was unnecessary, but I understood from their point of view why we had to do it. It got more exciting towards the end of it, where we got to the end of all our BKSB stuff, and English, for example, we'd have to write an essay instead, so it's technically still using your English skills, and they can be like, yeah, they've used English this month, but it wasn't on the BKSB, which I think we all hated by the end of it. And then there's project work, so you're given 3 projects a year, or you're given 3 projects as part of the apprenticeship, and you have to decide that with your employer, what's it about. So my first one, for example, was working on print on demand titles, so it was a production related role. My second project was I worked on a frontlist drama title, so I normally do backlist stuff and I don't normally work on drama titles. So I was basically responsible from taking it from like the manuscript brief basically all the way to the end of printing. And then my third and final project was based on NetGalley, so I did loads of work on uploading titles to NetGalley and managing like a reviewer database that we have and managing requests. So they're the kind of 3 projects that I did, but I know people from across the apprenticeship were doing loads of different things, and you basically just have to write like a report on it. It's like 20 pages, say for example, with all your evidence and what you learn, etc. And then finally you have the endpoint assessment, and that's made up of like 4 parts in the way I see it. So you have your portfolio, so that's like 20 pieces of evidence that you have to give, so that's all your off-the-job training stuff that you've done, any like testimonials that people you work with might have given you, any meeting notes that you took or anything like that. It's basically just evidence that you obviously have done work over like the course of the apprenticeship, and that doesn't get marked directly, but that's based on something that I'll come to in a minute. Then you have a project, so it's like similar to the other ones where you're given a title from the awarding body. So our awarding body was called AIM, and you're given a project title from that, and you have to do a written piece on that, so you have like a week off work to focus on that. And then related to that, you then have to prepare a presentation on your findings from that written report, and then you do that to the awarding body, and then that's for like say half an hour, and then you do a Q&A with them afterwards for like another half an hour. So that's all kind of like based on that one title that you chose. And then finally you have what's called a professional discussion, and that's basically like an interview for 2.5 hours with the awarding body, and they base that off of the portfolio that you submitted. So although the portfolio wasn't assessed directly, it's the basis of what they asked you questions about in your professional discussion, and it's basically going through their qualification, like their assessment criteria, and basically ticking off and making sure that you have actually learned something and you know what you're talking about and you're qualified and you know about stuff from all areas of publishing, all departments in publishing. So that endpoint assessment is basically what gives you your qualification of the publishing assistant apprenticeship. There were 2 of us apprentices working at Bloomsbury. Then we had people at Pearson, at Penguin Random House, at Springer Nature, at the BMJ, at HarperCollins, for example. So we really were like spread out. So this is the first time that an apprenticeship has been offered for a publishing assistant in the UK. So I felt quite privileged to be a part of that like new qualification. There were 16 of us in the first cohort. I suppose in a way we were kind of like guinea pigs because some things still weren't set in stone, whereas they know that now for future cohorts, and they have already got future cohorts working at different publishing houses. And it's not even publishing houses as well. So one of my friends, the apprentices, she works at Christie's auction house, but she is a publishing assistant there. So although Christie's is not directly a publishing house, they still have like an element of publishing to it when they publish their catalogues. Similarly, I know that in the new cohort someone works at a typesetting, like a project management house, so that's again not directly a publishing house, but they work with publishers and therefore you're still working in publishing. Yeah, so we really were like spread out across the place, so it was quite good to get their kind of ideas like every month and be like, oh, that's not how it works at ours, like we have this example, and that was particularly useful for all of us to understand how it differs across publishing houses. So you'll see in all my videos I'm always like, things differ across publishing houses, and that's because it really does, because even someone in like the same role, they can literally be doing something completely different from one publishing house to another. So initially the apprenticeship was supposed to be, I think it was supposed to be 13 months, so just over a year. And then because of COVID, we got an extension so that we'd have enough time to be Initially it was so that we'd have enough time to go back to the office and have proper like experience in the office again. Obviously that didn't happen, we were all working from home. So then it got extended so that we'd basically have enough time to do like our endpoint assessment and actually get our qualification. I did do like a 1-year review of my experience as at LDN and at Bloomsbury. So I'll put a link in that in the description below so that you can have a read of that as well, like my honest opinion on what I thought it's been like working with them. It's genuinely one of the best, if not the best decision I did working with LDN and doing that apprenticeship, because I would not have the experience that I do now if I didn't do that. If I went straight into an entry-level role in publishing, I'd have no idea what the other departments do. Whereas now, I can talk about rights, I can talk about finance, I can talk about marketing and publicity, which I wouldn't have been able to do if I just went straight into a production role, for example. I mean, I definitely took a different route into publishing. I think it's so common for people to do a university degree, particularly English or English literature or English language or something along those lines. Or some people do like a history degree, for example, and then it's also not uncommon to see people then do a master's in publishing, which I absolutely commend those people for doing that. Obviously that requires such hard work, but I am glad that I didn't go down that route. Initially I'd always grown up thinking that I would go to university, and then when it came to it and I didn't really know what I wanted to do, I was like, why would I go to university, spend that money when I don't know exactly what I want to do yet? And so although I hadn't considered an apprenticeship before, I'm so glad I did it through LDN, because like I said, it's not always cheap labour. Obviously you have a lot of misconceptions of apprenticeships and there are bad ones out there, but I really do recommend the one from LDN, like the publishing assistant, because they do push you and they are genuinely so supportive. Like if you have any problems, they'll get back to you. You have like a channel, like a chat forum, so you can always put questions in there. They genuinely want what's best for you, which I think is really important when you're going through that qualification and you're stuck at any point. Obviously they're there to support you at the end of the day. Each apprenticeship course you each get assigned a skills coach, so I had the lovely Vimbai who supported us all so much throughout the course, like so genuinely the loveliest person you'll ever meet, and basically just being like so encouraging. Like if you ever thought that you couldn't do something, Vimbai would be there like, yes you can, you're amazing, like you can do this. So yeah, I definitely went a different route into the publishing industry. So glad that I did the route that I did. If anyone has any particular questions about the apprenticeship or about getting a job into publishing, of course I'd be happy to help, especially providing insight into the apprenticeship that I'm proud to talk about. Yeah, I'll leave all my stuff that will be useful in the description below, like my 1-year review and LDN's website. But yeah, so that's kind of my experience of how I got into publishing. I'm going to be doing some videos in future on like tips to get into publishing, where I've spoken to other people about their opinions as well. For now though, I hope that you find that kind of like useful to any publishing hopefuls that don't know what routes to take. I know it's particularly difficult at the moment, so if any publishing hopefuls do have any questions, like please do let me know. I'll put all my socials in the description below. I'm also thinking of starting each YouTube video with like news so far that week, predominantly based off of the bookseller, but one thing I do like once a month is host like a publishing news update to say like what's been happening in the world with my cohort. So if you'll find that useful, let me know in the description below if you want me to start each video with just like a 1-minute roundup of like what's happening that week. If you're not already subscribed to the bookseller, I absolutely recommend that, because that is where I'll be taking all my information from. But yeah, I hope you found that useful. Please do comment below if you did find it useful, if you have any particular questions, because as I said, I'll be happy to answer them. Yeah, I feel like I did just completely rant on that, but I genuinely could talk about it forever, like my experience. So yeah, as I said, if you did find it useful, leave a comment below, and happy reading. Bye bye.